The best thing about that yoga class was the free water, is what I actually heard somebody say just a few days ago about my morning yoga class. Now, don't go feeling bad for me. I'm very secure in my yoga teaching abilities, skills, and talents. This is a story about energy, and you will receive aha moments for yourself on how to work with your own energy, how to contain it, how to stay authentic in it. So let me start at the beginning of the story and break it down for you. So this story spans 2 days. I was hired to teach beginner yoga at a hotel for some folks visiting for a conference, 2 mornings in a row. Again, beginner yoga. So, how I already started, I'll put a little context around that. I had finished teaching the class on the first morning, went to the bathroom. On my way back to leave, I'm passing by the organizers of the conference over here. And the person that made that comment was here, and he was looking at the organizers, and he said to them, the best thing about that yoga class was the free water, as he's holding like a cheapy plastic bottle. Then he looks and sees me and goes, and says, I didn't mean for you to hear that. I love how I responded. I simply said the truth, no judgment. I said, well, you're an Ashtangi, and this was a beginner yoga class. And that was it. The reason I love that response, there was no judgment, there was no apology from me, there was no conversation. It was just straight truth. It allowed him to have his experience. It allowed me to have my experience. But I also want to tell you how I was responsible for him saying that. In case you're like, what is an Ashtangi? It just means that he practices something called Ashtanga yoga. And without getting into any details, we have, say, beginner yoga here. And on a physical difficulty level, Ashtanga yoga is over here. You can always explore Ashtanga yoga to learn more. Now, how it started and how I was responsible for what he said is this. I'm teaching the class, and very subconsciously, I am feeling his energy that he's not enjoying the class. It's not difficult enough. Like I was picking up on that energy. And I decided to play with that energy of his versus staying in my authenticity and teaching the way I knew I needed to teach for the class. Now, it was only momentarily, but there was this tiny little moment where my energy, a piece of it says, well, I want to prove to you that I know Ashtanga and that I could teach a more difficult class. And so I ended up saying, when we were doing a floor seated stretch, I ended up saying, this pose is Janu Shirshasana. Now, in a beginner class, I would never say the Sanskrit word, especially when I'm only with people once or twice. But that was that little piece of energy that came out of my own authenticity to prove something to his energy that, was having his own experience. And it was only momentarily. But again, I want to be clear, I came out of my authenticity, right? To prove something to his energy. Okay. That's where I directed my energy. I gave a piece of myself away. I gave a piece of my power away. Anytime we are not fully authentic, we give a piece of our power away. So I gave a piece of my power away to prove something. And then it didn't stop there. I still taught a great class. This was momentarily. But at the end, when folks were wiping their mats, I had the idea in my head, I still wanted to prove something. I wanted to say, oh, I see you practice Ashtanga. to prove I knew the practice, right? There was that little piece of me that had to prove something. When we're fully in our authenticity, we don't have to prove anything. Well, people were leaving. I never got an opportunity to say that as he set his mat back on the table. And so the energy said, well, that's what your intention was. We'll set it up here. So that's how I was responsible for him saying that. I sent my energy on that journey, right? I very subconsciously sent my energy on a journey to prove that I knew the practice of Ashtanga. I was just choosing to teach what I was hired to teach, a beginning class. Now, this story has a part two, and there's a lot of takeaways. There's a lot of ahas for you that we will unpack. Stay with me. So, of course, I'm thinking about that throughout the day. It's not really bothering me at all because I was very clear that I taught a good class and that was his experience. So I was able to stay in the experience that I taught a good class and his experience was it wasn't a good class. Okay. I talked about it only to my fiance, probably 2 minutes, because I didn't want to give it a lot of energy, but I wanted to get a little bit more clear on it. And I also reflected on it after meditation, and I got really clear on how I directed my energy. Well, the second day I went to teach, I got very clear that I was going to stay in my authenticity of how I know it's best for me to teach a beginner class. And that was my commitment to myself to stay fully in my authenticity. I also wasn't going to play into his experience that it was a bad class, meaning I wasn't going to try to avoid him. I didn't know if he was coming back or not. I wasn't going to try to avoid or to say anything extra to the organizers. I had nothing to prove, once I got clear on what my authenticity was. So I didn't do anything different. I didn't try to say anything to the organizers. I didn't try to seek him out to explain, none of that. I simply showed up that second day, staying in the truth that I was there to teach an authentic class from the energy of love, from the energy of fully being me. And that was my commitment. I said that the morning before I left my house. I stayed in my car for an extra few minutes, did a prayer around staying in my authenticity, and then I went to teach. Very committed again. I'm repeating this to make a point, staying in my authenticity the full time. Well, some folks came early to the class, and I find this interesting. One of them said, oh, you should expect a lot of people today. We were raving about this class. We were telling everybody how good it was, expect a lot of people. Now, a few things there I want to help you unpack. That was the experience she had, right? And it wasn't for my validation, it was for my confirmation that I didn't have to play into that guy's experience that it was a bad class. I was just playing into my experience. And this woman simply confirmed that. However, I also wasn't leaning into her experience. It wasn't a good class because she said it was a good class. Okay. Because we also want to be careful and not send our energy to believe, right, any of these other experiences. We want to fully stay in our own experience. But she said that for my confirmation that it was like, yes, just stay in your own experience. All right. I do the class and I fully stayed in my authenticity. I taught the class exactly how I truly felt it needed to be taught as a beginner class. And not once did I come out of that authenticity. At the end of class, another woman said something like, can we just package you up and bring you with us so we can have more of these, when we go back home? Again, not validation, just confirmation that I never had to take on the idea that it was a bad class, right? Confirmation, the call was to stay in my own authenticity. That was energizing. It was truth. It was love, right? Again, doesn't matter if this person says it's bad, this person says it's good, not attaching to either of those, completely staying in my own energy of authenticity. When I stay in that energy of authenticity, I show up completely as myself, completely in a state of love, completely in a state of being in service to love and allowing love to flow through me. And again, teaching and being and doing from that essence. So I wanted to unpack that for you because there's so much there. It's super, super subtle. It's so subtle. And I love that I got that realization because there's a lot of things I could have done with that, right? I could have seen it as a lesson to maybe not people please. It wasn't that, meaning, oh, how could I have made it better? I could have seen it as a lesson to grow from. Okay, how could I have also included more things to be challenging in the class? Wasn't appropriate for this class. It wasn't a lesson in growth. Sometimes it is. This wasn't. This was a master course for me in energy, how energy moves, how we send our energy out. The difference from day one to day two, when I really committed to staying fully in authentic energy, fully myself. And that energy for me is just a full energy of love, right? Teaching from love, acting from love, being love. Yeah, just love, right? And again, the other takeaway that I want to share with you is this: let other people have their own experiences. I really do love that in the spur of the moment, all I said to that guy was just truth. Well, you practice Ashtanga, again, a challenging class. This was a beginner class. There was no judgment. That was just truth. And I also love that I didn't send my energy to try to be like, oh, what could I have done better? Wasn't needed. My energy didn't need to go there. Okay. I also love that I got to see what happened when I came out of inauthenticity. And we don't have to say that. Let's just say when I came into an energy of, let me prove I know Ashtanga, that energy is like, okay, we'll find a way to play that out. That's the big takeaway I want to give you. Even though it was literally a split second, it was like 5 seconds of the class when I came into the energy of I want to prove to you that I know Ashtanga, that energy is going to give me what I'm asking for. And it played out in the way it played out, right? Second day, when I stayed in the energy of love, that energy played out with me feeling energized and amazing after the class. And I'm just going to say, like, people left there looking like they were just floating, right? Lots of thank you, lots of gratitude. That's not why we're doing it. That's not why I'm doing it. But I'm saying that's how the energy of staying in love as I taught, staying true to the way I wanted to teach, that's how that energy of authenticity of love came out, right? That's how it manifested, so to speak. Okay, so I want to take this home with comparing the 2 days. The first day, the energy that was strong was this energy to prove something. Even though it was only a split second, it was a strong energy. And then the energy is like, well, we have to play out. We're going to play out what this guy saying. The best thing about that class was the free water. Second day, the energy that was really strong was teaching from love, teaching from authenticity. That was the energy of the entire class. And the way that energy played out was with a lot of gratitude, a lot of appreciation, a sweet comment. Like it was so sweet of, can we just package you up and take you with us, right? That's how the energy played out. So the takeaways are this: how are you sending your energy out? And then how is it showing up? That is the ask. Can you look at something? It's easy to look at the things that we don't like, right? Like, I didn't like that the guy said the best thing about this class is this. Actually, though, I kind of do because it unpacks so much, but you get my drift. Like, We don't really like somebody saying something negative about anything, let alone us. And again, I'm not saying that every single time you're responsible for that by any means at all. That is not what I'm saying. I'm showing you a case though of knowing how I sent my energy out, wanting to prove something and how it played out, right? So if there's something in your life, take other people out of it. There's something in your life you're not happy with, right? You're just not happy with it. How are you using your energy to invest in that thing you're not happy with? Um, Here's another way to look at it, another point I want to make. What perspective do you want to invest your energy in? Okay. What perspective? I could have invested my perspective in that guy's perspective that it was a bad class. I could have stayed on that and shown up in that perspective the next day, right? And even if I tried to teach the best class I ever taught, the perspective would have been I'm just trying not to teach a bad class. That's the energy, right? Because I invested in his perspective. But I chose to go, that's his perspective. I'm not investing in that. I'm going to invest in the perspective of teaching from authenticity. That's the perspective I want to invest in. I'm going to invest in the perspective of I'm a good teacher. This is a good class. I know how to teach a beginner class. I know how to make my class feel welcoming. That's the perspective I invested my energy into. And look at the outcomes from day one to day two. So that's the question I want to ask you as your takeaway here. That's what I wrote down. This whole overarching story is bringing you to more clarity within yourself. And here is the question I want you to write down, take into a journal session or a meditation session. What perspective do you want to invest your energy into? Maybe the perspective is I want to have a day filled with miracles. I want to have a day of fun. I want to have this meeting with this client be joyful. I want to have this lunch with my uncle be meaningful. That was the perspective I invested in the other day before I met with my uncle. And often when we meet, I'm kind of skirting around, like talking about, say, political issues. I don't even want to go there. But instead of even thinking about that, I invested in the perspective before I met with him of, I really want to have meaningful, deep conversation. That was my perspective. I showed up in that energy. And whoa, let me tell you, I left there so energized. We had the deepest, most meaningful, beautiful conversations. I mean, it went all over the place, but I was like, whoa, whoa. I left there so surprised, energized, delighted, in such a deep sense of love. Love my uncle so much, but then to go down that path, wow, right? I invested my energy in the perspective that we were going to have, not that we were going to have, that I wanted the perspective to be deep and meaningful. Didn't know how it played out, right? But just the perspective was deep and meaningful. All right, I'm going to wrap this up. I think I've said that 3 times now. What perspective do you want to invest your energy into? It could be for a whole day, or if that feels like that's a lot to start with one thing you're going to do, a lunch with somebody, a solo date with yourself, a business meeting. Just pick anything and decide the perspective you're going to invest your energy into. Get into that energy before you enter that thing and then see what plays out. I look forward to hearing how it played out for you. Share with me. Let me know. We'll keep having conversations like this.